And we're live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Wirelive, our second episode, in fact. And, well, I think it's going to be a fun one. I'm joined by someone who I have a lot of love and admiration for, Mr. Ian Hamilton, who will join us momentarily. Today, we're going to be talking about Ian's life, really. He's had quite an interesting journey through, I suppose, his professional life, his career. Started out in a kind of creative world, and I'll let him tell this in a bit more detail in a minute. Where we're going to land is his current role and his current business is in the VR space. And I really want to talk a bit about VR, virtual reality, AR, XR, that whole kind of platform that is emerging, I think largely misunderstood still, and in many ways hasn't quite realized its potential yet. So really interested to talk a bit about VR. And then we're going to close off today by talking about an amazing venture that Ian and I are both involved in called Offset Earth, which is all about trying to help offset our carbon footprint and ultimately help people and businesses kind of take charge of their impact on the climate and ideally get to net zero as well. So quite a nice, diverse one for you today. Without any further ado, let me introduce Ian. Ian, thank you for joining us. Say hello to everybody.
Hello, everyone.
Good stuff. So, Ian, it all began in Birmingham, is that right?
Well, where I was born, yeah.
Let's go right back.
Born actually in Solihull, which makes me like a sort of posh Brummie, slightly posh Brummie. But I moved away when I was 18 to uni, and I've never been back. Unfortunately, well, very rarely. My parents lived in France since I was about 12 or 13.
Yeah.
So really, that's more home than. But yeah, I'm a Brummie, definitely.
Cool. And so, after your time at Cadbury College, thanks LinkedIn.
Jesus,
you weren't expecting that, were you? God. Most people don't put their college on LinkedIn, so that was fun. You know, it's that thing where you know someone really well, but then you do a bit of research anyway because you're going to interview them and you find out all this stuff you didn't know about them. Yeah, so after you left Cadbury, you ventured out into the nefarious world of agencies and set up Output, right? And were you part of the founding team there? Tell us a bit about that journey and where it all started for you.
So when I left Birmingham, I went up to Nottingham to university there. And I have to admit that like my foray into creative business, which is now called being an entrepreneur, right? But
yeah,
basically just started from me being a nightclub promoter. So I got which you can probably see now. So I went to uni, did politics and media and a few things like that, and got really bored quite early on in my degree. And so I ended up just running nightclubs for the last couple of years and did that until I was about 24.
Mm-hmm.
And Dan and Rob used to design all my flyers way back in the day, to the point that, you know, a long, long time ago, me and Dan laughed that we used to sit there next to each other in the offices of 1210 where I used to work and smoke cigarettes and design flyers, like, you know, proper old school weirdness. So did that, and then basically I said to him, I don't think I can be in nightclubs for much longer. It's just hard work. Because, you know, to be good at that stuff, you have to work in the day and all night.
Yeah. So
we basically decided to set up Output, or Studio Output as it was then. And Rob, who was also there at 1210, jumped ship at the same time. And we basically set it up then age 24-ish.
Right.
Yeah.
Quite young to go set up on your own like that.
Yeah, I'm basically pretty unemployable. I've only had one job ever. And I got like perm job after uni, and I was sacked within about 6 weeks, and I've never had a job for anyone else since. So I don't know whether now, if I had to get a job, I'd be capable of being, you know, I don't know. So yeah, it was pretty young.
And so Output was, I guess, a creative agency, really, at its core. Is that fair?
I think when we set up, it was a design agency. Our aspirations were to have 6 people max. You know, small little thing, designing stuff for music industry and entertainment, basically. And then just over the years, it grew to do more digital, but really, it's, I suppose, a branding and design agency, basically, at its core.
Yeah, and And I remember, and that kind of gets us to the point in this journey where our lives collided. So when I first met you, you were kind of fairly far along on the output journey and just beginning to explore China as another territory, which was quite, I remember thinking, as you showed me around your studio in London, oh, it's quite progressive, the whole Chinese side of it. And, you did a couple of real showpiece pieces of work. I think Pottermore was you guys, wasn't it? And there were a couple of others that you had a huge part in. Looking back, because obviously, well, jumping ahead a little bit, you've moved on from that as your day-to-day role now, although you're still a shareholder. What were the kind of highlights for you in the output journey? Like, what were the things you're proud of? What are the things you remember about it?
Yeah, God, it's a long time. I can't of being there. I set up, I suppose, my highlights. We did some really big bits of work over that time.
Yeah.
But my highlights are more the business sort of ones that we did. So setting up the London office, moving to London, and setting up Glug at the time. We bought Found. We got into motion and animation and motion design early, and we bought Found Studio, who are thriving still now.
Yeah.
That was like 2011 or something like that. We went out to China. We did some massive projects in China. We set up an office in Beijing. That was definitely an interesting journey for 3 or 4 years, although ultimately didn't end particularly well. Yeah. But it's still a highlight. It was a pretty monster time. Yeah, and then along that way doing Glug and that sort of thing. And running the different businesses.
And so great segue into talking a bit about Glug then. So Glug is something that a lot of people know. It's huge. Like I can't imagine you ever dreamt it would get as big as it has when you started it. Tell us a little bit about what Glug is and how that all came about and where it is now.
So Glug was, when I moved to London, set up the London studio, we were known as a design and creative agency, but not massive, right? Yeah. So, and I went to a few very dull networking events with like 7 or 8 awkward people in a room, just tragic, basically. Yeah. And so me and Clem just had a beer and we were chatting, and I was like, oh my God, why is networking so dull? So we set it up originally to meet people in London and to get the name of Output out there. Mm-hmm. And then what happened over the first 2 or 3 years is it became bigger than Output, I suppose, in terms of like, and also it never really, after a certain stage, did much for Output, but was good fun to do. So yeah.
It made you famous in a way, I suppose, if nothing else. Kind of made you famous in the industry, if nothing else.
Really put Output on the map, definitely. But then it was a weird thing, and I suppose you've done this over the years, where you start up a thing that's slightly marketing and slightly about positioning and all that stuff, and then sometimes if things are really successful, they grow their own arms and legs, and then everyone was like, wow, this thing's really fun and successful, and and you're like, oh, and it's actually quite a distraction for the business. So yeah, I think if you ask Dan and Rob, most of what I've done at Output has been adding distractions and new to do, right? So but yeah, it was good. And then we basically hired some people to take it on, and then it's in like 40 cities around the world, and the London one, well, at the moment with COVID, obviously there are no events, but last year I think we did 40 or so events in London, and one's up in Manchester. But it's taken on its own life, basically. So Pete's the CEO there, and it's doing its own thing now, basically. So.
And sort of become a business in its own right. And just for everyone's benefit, watching or listening back to this, Ian has just sort of casually glossed over the fact that they started a small local networking event in London, which now is essentially franchised into 40 cities, or no, more cities, right, across the world, and ran 40 events in London last year. I mean, look, let's just say it's global, right? That's the easy way to describe it. Yeah. It's regarded in the creative industry still today as the cool event to go to. I must say, whenever I've come to Glug, I feel like I'm not quite cool enough to be there, right? Because I'm not a creative. And I know, but you know what I mean. It's it has a kind of pedigree, right? And it's really well respected. And I get the impression if you're a young creative coming up in the industry in London, it's the event you go to because, as you say, it is networking. It is a chance to connect with your peers and maybe find new opportunities or learn about some new interesting work that's been done. But it's done in a way that is kind of familiar, I guess, to that world. And like the last one I went to in person was at Van's venue in London. Yeah. There's like a skate park, and it's all like really cool. And anyway, and it sort of takes on. It almost feels a little bit like a mini festival when I've been to them, because you've got like different talks in different rooms, and there's kind of a bit of everything going on. And I know Microsoft supported it for a long time, and would have their kit there for people to play with and all that kind of stuff. So just an amazing thing to have been part of, and yet another business that you've spawned in your efforts to never get employed by anybody else, and have now sort of moved on from a little bit and put a team in, and that's fantastic. And so, okay. Now let's get to the VR part of this. So
yeah. So that's Glug, yeah, basically.
Yeah. So that's Glug, right? Amazing. You're being very modest. I want to make sure that people understand how major it is that you put, what you built there. No mean feat at all. So VR, right? So at some point you went, right, this VR thing. So I don't think I've ever really quizzed you on this when we've spoken. So what happened? How did you end up coming to the idea of Maze Theory? Where did it all start?
So I suppose one thing I like to do in businesses is back talent and come across interesting people and go, I've got a bit of an interest in that, but wow, this person, he's amazing. And sometimes those people in the creative world aren't that forthcoming about their own skills and abilities, right? Mm-hmm. So the one thing I perhaps try and do is go, oh my God, you're amazing. I can put you in a place that will make everyone realize how amazing you are. So there's a guy called Marcus Moresby, who's the co-founder in Maze. And I've worked with him for 15 years now. He was at Mainframe before, and then he was one of the partners in Found when we bought them. We acquired them, right? So we've been through an acquisition and the earn out and all that stuff, and we're still really good friends. So that's and those things are never that easy, right? So he was at Found, and then by skill, he's like a amazing animator, motion designer, but he loves immersive theatre. I mean, he's crazy about it.
It's like his great passion, almost.
Yeah. I mean, he's been to some Punch Drunk shows 50 times to the same show, right? He's just nuts. Wow. And he's into gaming as well. And basically, he came to me 3 years ago and said, look, if I had a choice, I would only want to work in virtual reality, because it brings together all of his major passions, like animation, real-time, 3D, immersive theatre. So you basically, VR is like being inside the show or inside the game. Yeah. And gaming to a certain degree, and storytelling, right? So that's what he's interested in. And to be honest, I'm just mad keen on film, TV. In another life, I'd have loved to have worked in film or TV, to be honest. And so Maze Theory is really a thing about that. It's about creating our own stories in the most forthright, future-facing technologies. And we don't just do VR now. We do like mobile. Doctor Who's going to be a mobile game as well, a console PC. So it's just telling stories in like a very future-facing medium. VR itself, whilst it's not tipped into the mainstream, it is such a wow medium, It's just not been as usable yet. So, yeah, that's basically how we got in. So we basically talked about it. We have a non-exec guy who is, I've always believed in listening to other people come in and tell you a little bit of their experience. So we got a guy called Jeff Heath. He's an amazing guy. You should look him up. He's the only person to have received an Ivor Novello, and he's not a musician. He used to be in the music industry in the 70s, 80s. He bought John Lennon and McCartney's label off them.
Wow.
Without them actually, he was at an accountancy firm, this great story, that basically realised that because they'd gone public with their, I think it's called Northern Songs or whatever it was called, they bought it off them, much to the displeasure of Lennon and McCartney. And Jeff's first job was to go and track those guys down and persuade them to work with him, which he did. So he did that, and then he got out of music in the 80s and went into gaming because he realised that was going to be big. And he's basically one of the major names in the UK games industry, set up like Activision Europe and loads of stuff. But basically, he was weirdly sitting on the output board, and he said, "Guys, you don't want to do this branded content in VR. Do your own stuff. Look at Marcus; he's got so much talent. Let him open his wings." So that's what we've done.
Amazing. And so today, Maze Theory, while it has this sort of foot firmly in the VR world, it sounds like it's going to be something much bigger than that. It's about almost, would it be fair to sort of almost articulate it as a modern entertainment business? It's like using all these different technology-enabled mediums to tell stories in a really immersive way, whether that's console gaming, VR headset, AR, XR, all the different things that are coming down the pipe. It sounds like you're not restricting yourselves to a medium, really. It's about the experience for the audience and looking at all the different ways you can bring that to life. Is that about right? Yeah.
We have a sort of wanky marketing term, which is like evolutionary storytelling, but it's just like storytelling at the forefront. But yeah, we see VR as like probably the most premium version of that sort of experience, because you're literally standing in that world.
Yeah.
So with Doctor Who, that's very much like, for fans, it's like, have you ever wanted to be there, right? And be in the show.
And just, you've mentioned the Doctor Who project a couple of times. Just sort of illustrate what that is that you guys did, because people won't be familiar with it.
Yeah, sorry. So when we set up in 2018, we were going to make our own IP. And Marcus did a project called The Vanishing Act, which the guys at BBC Studios came in and saw and were like, "Oh my God, that's amazing. Can you make a Doctor Who game instead?" And we were like, "Okay, that wasn't the plan, but it's Doctor Who. Yeah, do it," right? So we made a game which we launched last November. So May started in 2018. We launched our first game last November off the back of that, and that's been really well received with fans. And off the back of that, we've now just announced that we're doing a PC console version, and then we're doing a mobile game as well. So, and all of them are really different ways to do storytelling. So the mobile game is like, I don't know if you've heard of a phone takeover game. So it's like you found a mobile phone that someone else's, and you have to hack into it.
Oh yeah. Those sort of it's almost like an escape room in a weird kind of way, like the challenge of it. Different puzzles along the way and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So we're doing one of those. So basically, but all of them really, it's about the story of the Doctor Who universe and being inside that in a different way.
Right.
Yeah. That is what Maze is about, really.
And so, as you described it, VR is the kind of premium end of that. Certainly from a hardware cost perspective for the audience, that's true. Why do you think, VR is probably in the sort of slow, in the trough of disillusionment, right, on Gartner's hype cycle model, I would guess. And maybe
just out of that.
Yeah.
So what? 100%.
So why is it just this normal technology life cycle thing, or was it a bit misunderstood? Like, why? I guess what I'm getting at is, why do you think VR is not a bigger deal yet? What's holding it back?
Okay, so we 100% were, like, maybe a year, 2 years ago, were in the trough of disillusionment. And whilst it is amazing, like, everyone that tries it for the first time is like, wow, that's amazing, right? Yeah. Some of the early technology didn't, even in its most recent incarnation, haven't done it great. Like 360 video in VR makes people sick. So there's a whole myth that, VR makes you sick and all this stuff, which comes from pretty low grade VR, where you're just in a bubble and it doesn't work on 6 axis, basically.
Yeah. Yes.
The thing that probably has held it back the most in its, like, the last 4 years is a lack of focus on usability, right? So I have this thing like the John Lewis test. So 3 years ago, if you bought a VR headset, you would go and buy one for like £500. And if, you went into a John Lewis and you said, "Can I have one?" They'd sell it to you and they'd say, "Right, okay, so you've got all the kit here, and this thing needs to be tethered to a PC that's going to cost you another $2,000. And then you've got these 4 sensors that you need to go and stick up in the corners of the room." And, like, it's like a flipping massive DIY project, right? So And so it was doing that classic technology thing of like having amazing hardware, but not thinking about how normal people, mainstream people, want to use it. So PlayStation really led the way with probably not the best kit, but it plugged into most PlayStations, right? So all you needed was basically the headset, plug into your PlayStation, you're good, right? Used an existing camera. So they've sold they're about 50 or 60% of the market, the total market, just by usability. And then basically the Quest came along last year, and it's all about usability. So it's like, you get it out of the box, you go to John Lewis, that's it. It's the only thing you need, $400 or £399. You get it out, it's got inside-out tracking, so you don't need any sensors. All the PCs inside, but you still got the hand things. It's really, I think it was Time's device of the year, last year. It is properly amazing.
Yeah. And yet most people watching this won't have even seen one, let alone put one on yet.
No. And I think the really weird thing is, so it's been sold out pretty much ever since it's launched. They didn't realize how big it was going to be.
Right.
And probably didn't order the millions and millions that they needed, right? Because that's the thing when you launch a bit of hardware. And I think the plan with those guys is there's a Quest 2, which they're going to go big on with a much higher chip. But I do think VR will probably be slowish burner. I think I'm not even sure it'll ever be as big as console, because there is always something about going into a room and putting a headset on your head, and so that holds back a bit. I'd say the other thing is, until it's truly multiplayer, that's when things ignite. If you look back at games consoles, it's just like when it's a singular experience, it's not the same. So that, I think, is where we're at. But I do think the Quest has basically given everyone in the industry a bit of a shot in the arm. They're selling tons of software on it.
And they've created so the Quest is by Oculus. Oculus is one of the leaders in VR. They were bought by Facebook 2 years ago, I think it was. Yeah. So they've got the behemoth of Facebook behind them now. So if anyone's going to pull it off, it feels like it should be them. I would say. Yeah. They're building a kind of app store thing. There's like a marketplace for it, right, with their own software deployment.
Headset. It's like, and they are they are selling a lot of software, right? So people are buying it and spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars on the software comparative to console, and it's basically made everyone go, "Oh, whoa, this is proper."
Right. Yeah, there is a market here. It's worth investing in building these experiences. And actually, I mean, if you look at gaming as an industry, I mean, I think Fortnite has brought this into focus for a lot of people in the last year. I mean, I'm guessing most people watching this probably know more about Fortnite than they knew about VR, right?
Yeah.
Thinking about it logically, and so Fortnite is the biggest computer game in the world right now. It's a massively multiplayer experience, and it's created this crossover of entertainment and gaming. They've been running concerts inside the Fortnite world and doing all this kind of crazy stuff, and it's sort of testing the limits of what is possible in that kind of construct of gaming. And their vision, they say, is to get to this kind of metaverse idea, a bit like in the film Ready Player One and the book, about bringing all these different things together in a virtual space. Do you think is it inevitable that's where it ends up, and just a question of how long it takes, do you think? Or is there always going to be that barrier, that kind of human layer about not wanting to close yourself into something? What do you think?
I think it's like VR is at that Commodore 64 point in the VR journey. Honestly, I think it's like, if you look back at 80s gaming, you'd be like, oh my God, look how rubbish that is, right? But people loved it because it was just that. And then multiplayer happened, and then open world happened, and all that stuff in gaming. I'm not a massive gamer, but basically that's what Fortnite's like, the evolution in so many ways. In terms of the purchasing, it's free, and then you buy little bits and pieces, right? That's a different model. So that's like the most mature version of gaming in terms of where it's classically been. And I would say VR is really early on in that journey. But the thing it has over Fortnite is that when you're in that world, you are like literally there. So it's like living in dreams, right? It's like, so what will happen? I think it'll progress and it'll go through different hurdles along the way. It might be a bit slow. And there'll also be some hardware things that happen. We talk to people like, the Magic Leap guys who, well, whatever's going on with them at the moment, they were talking about an AR, VR mixed reality glass that you wear that's very lightweight, that can switch from being completely enclosed. Imagine a pair of Ray-Bans that basically locked off and kept you in, but they also work as AR glasses. And I think ultimately that's where it'll go.
Interesting. Yeah, I think the Google Glass experiment was interesting. I think a lot of people may remember that, those sort of slightly janky looking glasses that made you look a bit like a budget cyborg. It was clear from the reaction people had to those that it would never really catch on as an everyday thing in a public setting until they became more fashionable, I guess. Like just a bit more tactile in the way that they looked and felt. Although, having said that, I think when AirPods turned up and everyone had those little alien sticks poking out of their ears, everyone went, wow, they look ridiculous, that'll never catch on. And now, right, it's just become normal. So it's interesting, isn't it? Like maybe I guess is what I'm saying. It doesn't necessarily have to be like the best pair of Ray-Bans you've ever had, but equally it can't look completely naff like the Google Glass did. I don't know. But
symmetry between what I said about usability in VR and Google Glass, right? They were awful. And basically you can't make people aren't going to want to look like an idiot, right? So you've got to find that natural place, which is like, how usable is this versus how cool is the technology? And, those AirPods, as you say, they looked a bit weird, but they're pretty close to what you expect or what you used to. Yeah. And, so I think usability is such an important thing in terms of bringing on technology.
Yeah, definitely. What someone watching live says, Beat Saber is a great example of the VR experience. Beat Saber is a game that it's a bit like DDR. If you're watching this and you're wondering, which is that game, Dance Dance Revolution, where you had to sort of dance around on the pads and press up and down and left and right in time with the music. So Beat Saber is one of the really popular titles where you sort of do that in a virtual environment with lightsabers. I'm saying this out loud like it's a normal thing to say. It's like it's kind of a crazy concept. But yeah, Beat Saber is one of those games that really brings the whole thing to life for people. And I think that's one of the titles that I think when people try it, they go, okay, I get it. Like, this is a whole new paradigm, and it can.
Well, the thing is, if you tried that 3 years ago, and that game was around, it was made by a really small Eastern European studio at the time.
Yeah.
It's like Guitar Hero, but in VR, right? But with it's really clever, right? It's sold millions and millions and millions. But even if I'd have tried that 3 years ago, I'd have still at the John Lewis counter gone, there's a barrier to buying the headset, right? You love it. Whereas now I just chuck the Quest and you just take it round to your neighbours. It's like super portable. And that's probably still not down the way. So, I think you're right. It is just like this journey towards usability, but also the quality's got to be there too. So
yeah, no, I agree. So sort of before we move on from VR, let's talk about the business context. I know this isn't necessarily the thing that you're focused on seemingly at Maze at the moment, but the other side of VR is this idea that it may become useful for bringing people together remotely. Very pertinent at the moment, given we're recording this during the corona pandemic. I think I'm still a bit skeptical on this. I believe in it for gaming and for entertainment, that I can see. I'm still a little bit skeptical that people are going to find sitting around in a virtual environment as avatars with headsets on a better experience than doing what we're doing right now and talking on a video, on a video call for productivity, for, this idea that we might sit in a virtual cinema together with a virtual screen in the space with us, so we can feel like we're sitting with our mates in the cinema watching the same movie, or from a I guess that's not a work thing, but similar idea. You might attend a conference, let's say, instead of going to South by Southwest in Texas, everyone might just stick their VR headset on, but they'd frame it so you were still kind of in the audience with a couple of 100,000 people. Like, what do you think about that as a concept? Do you think it's a goer? Is that going to catch on?
So I actually think the person that nails Skype VR, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever video conference, that is just going to make them so much money. It's just insane.
Right.
But what I would say to you is it's like all the things we're talking about. It's like, at what point does the VR experience, which is currently a bit of a crappy avatar experience and all a bit flat and everything, supersede the video conference as we have now, which, okay, quality-wise looks good, but, doesn't quite feel like I'm in the room with you.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And I just think that is just the journey of technology that needs to happen. I'm trying to think of some examples. This is in Kingsman. Have you seen
the film. Yeah.
There's like that scene where they all sort of like log in round the table for the meeting sort of thing.
They're holograms, aren't they? They all come in as holograms into the space. Yeah.
So it's not going to work when people are avatars and all that stuff, even though it tracks your voice, your mouth now. But when you can make the glasses really easy to just chuck on, like a pair of Ray-Bans, and we've all got proper mapped versions of our faces.
That are actually us, you mean? So they're still
pretty close, a stylized version. And, you can get like a sense from different people of what they're not thinking, but their emotions and how they're...
So it's body language, really.
Yeah. It will. If it's done, when it's done well, it will be like being in a room. And look at the whole COVID thing. We've all sort of gone, remote working. Well, it's pretty easy getting to meetings now, isn't it? Right? It's like 2 minutes before, I've got to hit a button, right? Instead of going to South by, it's like there will be this sort of, they'll get to a point where the technology is good enough to overlap video conference. And I think, when that happens, it's very difficult for us now to have the vision to see how good that's going to be. That's what I think.
Great. Love a prediction.
I'm up for investing, right, in a company.
Cool. And Ian takes a plural approach to business with portfolio companies that he has, as he said, likes to support great founders. So if you're watching this or listening back and you're that person with that vision, give Ian a bell, I think is what he's saying.
Yeah.
But that's cool. That's exciting.
Facebook might crack it first. I mean, I think the truth is, I think the reason that Facebook are in VR
is that
maybe not so much business, but to bring people together in social in that way. That's what I think.
Yeah, I happen to know a couple of people that are in the Oculus team. What can I say? Yes.
That's what I think.
Yes, that's about right.
Like, social media company buys technology that can deliver social media in a new way. It's like,
right.
Okay.
I mean, it's not a big leap, is it? I suppose. Could make a magic leap joke there, but I won't. Okay, awesome. Well, look, VR, I think we've covered it. I love a prediction, so there's a prediction for you all. An expert in the field reckons it is going to take off eventually when they get there with the technology.
I think it will not be as big as consoles, but I think it will be big, right? Yeah. But I think it's going to be a slow burner, and people need to be patient on that journey. That's what I'm saying.
Cool. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk to you about today, which we'll move on to now, is our joint venture. So Ian, in our world that Ian and I both operate in as CEOs of businesses in the kind of digital and technology world, we all just like to kind of stay in touch with each other. And I guess you sort of build these professional friendships, right? You build acquaintances along the way who you don't actually end up ever doing any work with because it didn't quite fit or whatever, but you like each other and you're interested in what everyone's doing, so you just sort of stay in touch. And so Ian and I were having one of those chats just after Maze had been set up. He invited me to come and see their office. And so along I went, and we were talking. What was there to talk about Maze, really, and what Wirelive were up to, and we both kind of evolved a bit from where we were. And I remember we were sat downstairs after you showed me around, and you went, "Oh, do you want to stay for a coffee?" I was like, "Yeah, great." And there we were. And we got talking about this thing that at that point was just a seed of an idea, which was Offset Earth, which many people watching this will have heard of by now, and rightly so, because it's grown into a huge success since then. But I just thought it would be fun to sort of tell that story and maybe then talk a bit about what's going on with it and share some of our vision, because we're both part of it. So I was, at that point, Elliot, the founder and MD of Offset Earth, had said to me, like, I've got this crazy idea, what do you reckon? And I thought it was a cracker of an idea, but I just, you know what it's like when you bump into one of these kind of weird and wonderful plans that might change the world, you just want to tell everybody about it and see what they think and kind of like gauge the response. So I was in that phase, I think, from memory. And we were chatting away, and I sort of said to you, I've got this mate and he wants to create this platform to let people plant trees, and can you believe that it's nothing like this yet? And your reaction was great, because it was exactly the same reaction I'd had with Elliot when he'd first told me, right? And then, and I think I obviously like gave you that earworm, because within 24 hours you were on the phone or email or whatever it was to say, like, we've got to do this, like, I want to get involved. And frankly, you have done more than I do. You know, you have absolutely piled in and have given those guys so much support in making this come to reality. You know, some of your gaming connections have been very useful on the funding side, and it's all just been fantastic. So look, I mean, what should we say? I mean, talk about Offset Earth. What does it mean to you?
Interesting as well is like, I believe everyone lives in their own fake realities, right? And like my coach talks to me about that a lot. And you're like, yeah, and like in 24 hours, you came back to me and we all said, oh, it was about 2 months later, I think.
Was it?
But I can tell you the fun backstory for me on that was that it was the 2 or 3 minute preamble before we chatted about business. And it was fun. It was just a little bit of like, oh, there's this cool thing. We got excited about it. And we went on to talk about other stuff.
Yeah.
But the thing for me was, and I just logged it in my mind and went, oh, that sounds like a cool thing. Anyway, I've got, as I mentioned, I've got a coach that I use, a guy called Martin Palethorpe. Amazing. Has changed my life in the last 3 years. Just unbelievable. Taught me loads of stuff. And he's quite on the environmentalist front, like was very early in the whole Extinction Rebellion thing before that happened. And anyway, it was last Easter, and he basically told me about a white paper he'd read on climate change, right? And he said to me, so the thing about scientists is generally they're paid to write the stuff that they write. So quite often at the end of a paper that's all about the apocalypse and how bad it's going to be, there's like a nice sweetener of like, oh, but you know, it could be all right at the end.
Yeah, but Shell Oil reckon it's probably okay. Yeah, exactly.
Paper will buy, you know, whoever. Yeah. So they're don't normally end badly, but he basically gave me this to read. He said, you should read this. It's written by a woman who basically took 6 months off to do independent research into the whole thing. And I naively was on my way over to the house in France, and I thought to myself, I've got a VR marketing plan to do for this game, but I'll just bang in 10 minutes reading this white paper thing. It's not long, you know, on the plane. Like, it's an hour and a half journey. I'll get that done and then get on the marketing. So I spent the first 10 minutes reading this horrendous white paper about how we're all completely screwed if we don't get sort things out in the next 5 years. And I just sat there afterwards, just kind of unable to think about a marketing plan for a game, you know. And I was just like really in mourning, thinking my kids aren't going to exist, and my kids are not going to have a life the same as us. So I literally was there in France like 2 or 3 days, pretty unable to sort of talk, like, you know, I was properly mortified. Yeah. And I think I spoke to my dad, who's like a quite funny, grumpy Derby guy that's a scientist. And I said, oh, you know, the end of humanity, you know, blah, blah, blah. And he went, well, there's one thing that's certain in life, Ian, is that, like, humanity will eventually end. Right? It's like, oh.
Such a scientist's answer.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, okay. So anyway, what it did is it just said, if I'm going to do something, I always want to do things about things I care about. And the thing I can always do is bring my networks and my entrepreneurial spirit to things. So I just remembered our conversation, and that's when I texted you and was like, right, I need to meet him. What's this thing? And it looked good, and the brand looked good, and we met Elliot and Alex, and yeah, we just that's how it started, really.
I like your story better than mine. I've clearly missed that important middle section. It's funny, like you say.
He called me the day after. I'm like, wow, yeah. So
that's probably the story I've been telling ever since, to be honest.
Exactly, it's fine.
Someone once told me never let the truth get in the way of a good story, and I thought that was quite an interesting perspective. But and yeah, I mean, look, and it's gone from that crazy beginning to 2 million trees in just over a year, and 1,000 businesses now on the platform. Milestone as of this week, we've got 1,000 businesses paying to make their workforces carbon neutral, which is incredible. Did you really think it could get this big this quickly? I know we all hoped it would. Did you always thought it would?
Yeah, I think we're so we're in the minuscules of where this business will be. Honestly, I think it's such a funny one. We got into it. I mean, if there's one bit of advice I'd say from listening to this whole thing, and I know this comes from a position of luxury to be able to decide this, but I would just say to people, do things you care about and love and have fun more than chasing the money, because the money will just naturally come as a result of a brilliant thing that you enjoy and you're passionate about, right? And with Offset Earth, it's not about money, because none of the founders want to make anything from it particularly, yeah. But because we're all so passionate about it and love it, and it's a great thing, it's just flying. I mean, I look at some of the metrics that are available because we make everything available, and it's just like this. It's just
yeah, up and to the right.
Yeah, it just goes like that. I mean, sometimes I wish it was going more like that, but because I'm an impatient bastard. But it's flying. Every 30 days we grow by about 20%, and we're only at the very start. So it's an amazing business. It's an amazing thing, doing something great.
We could carry on, but I think that's such a nice sentiment to end on. I'm actually going to kind of draw it to a close there, which is
podcast in a year, right, about it, because I think it'll just be totally so humongous by then.
I think so too. I think it's going to be a global hit. It's going to become a household name, right, to a whole generation of people who aren't going to accept that they can't do something about this problem. And the support that we get is unbelievable. And I'm really passionate about Wirehive, and I love it, as I'm sure you do with Maze Theory. But it's just a kind of different kind of energy that it gives me to be doing something like this too. And so I would agree with Ian. Do the things that you're passionate about, or there'll be probably an abject failure. Yeah. In one way or another. But also find the time, if you can, you have the luxury that we do, I suppose, to do something on the side that speaks to this kind of different thing, which is about doing something that you care about that also does something great for other people. Because I think for me, the joy I get from it is thinking about the impact on your children's lives, right, and everybody that has to live on this planet for the next 100 years. We are genuinely making a difference, and I think that's an amazing feeling. So anyway, it's all a bit earnest, isn't it? Check out Offset Earth, sign up, offset.earth. We don't make any money. It's all about the impact. We make all our figures transparent, as Ian says, and we'd love your support. We'll pay for it out of our own pockets because we think it's what we should all be doing. Ian, any closing thoughts? Anything else? Any shout outs or promotions you want to make?
No, I think you just, if you have got to this point in the live stream, you deserve to sign up to Offset. That's it. No,
as payment for your entertainment for now. Yeah, I'll take that.
Well, yeah, maybe we should offer them free subscriptions for listening this long. But anyway, but yeah, that's.
Ian, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your journey. I hope you're right about VR. It's really energizing to just hear about that kind of enthusiasm-led entrepreneurial spirit that you've had, I guess, focusing on the things that you enjoy and that fulfill you, and hoping to make something work commercially as well, and not following the money, right? As you say, I think there's more to it than that. yeah, thank you very much for listening. If everyone that's been with us live or you're listening back to the podcast, that was Wirelive episode 2. Thank you. Good night. Much love.